Chapter 6. Here's Gunshots. One day, while Robinson was in the valley cutting branches for charcoal, he pushed aside some underbrush near a large rock and discovered a small opening in the ground. Squeezing through it, he found himself inside a spacious cave, tall enough for him to stand. Coming in from the bright sunlight, it was quite dark, so he turned his back to the entrance to navigate further in. Suddenly, two glowing eyes appeared in the shadows, staring at him. His heart raced, and he panicked, convinced he was facing a devilish creature. He ran out of the cave, shouting in fear. However, once outside in the sunlight, he realized his panic might have been unnecessary, and that the eyes were likely just a figment of his imagination. Determined to face his fear, he grabbed a burning branch and entered the cave again. After just a few steps, Robinson stopped, gripped by the same fear. He heard a heavy sigh, followed by muttering sounds he couldn't understand, and then another sigh. Trembling, he stepped back, but resolved not to run away this time. Holding his torch high, Robinson carefully searched the cave. On the ground lay an old goat, gasping for breath and seemingly dying of old age. Robinson gently nudged it with his foot to see if it could be moved, but the goat remained still, so he left it there to die in peace. Once his fear had subsided, Robinson looked around the cave more thoroughly. It was small, no more than 12 feet wide, but he noticed another opening at the far end. It was so low that he had to crawl on his hands and knees to enter it. Without better lighting, he couldn't see how far the passage extended, so he decided to return later. Robinson had previously made a small stock of candles from the fat of goats he had killed, so the next day he returned with 6 candles and his tinderbox to light them. At that time, matches had not yet been invented, and people used flint, steel, and tinder to start fires. Inside the cave, Robinson found the goat had died. After moving it aside for later burial, he crawled through the narrow passage and eventually reached a large chamber with a ceiling about 20 feet high. The walls sparkled, reflecting the candlelight like gold or diamonds. The floor was dry and level, and there was no dampness on the walls. Robinson was thrilled by his discovery, though the low entrance was a drawback. However, he saw it as an advantage, especially if he ever needed to defend himself. One person with firearms could easily hold the entrance against many attackers. Robinson immediately began storing his supplies in the cave: powder, lead for making bullets, and spare firearms. While moving some powder, he decided to open a barrel he had salvaged from the wreck after the earthquake. Though some water had seeped in, the powder inside was still good. With this, he had a large enough supply to last him a lifetime. Over the course of more than 22 years on the island, Robinson had grown accustomed to his life there. He often thought he could live out the rest of his days in peace, as long as he was sure no other people would come to the island. As December approached, which was his harvest time, Robinson was usually out working in his fields before dawn. One morning, eager to finish harvesting, he left his house well before the first light of day. As he crossed the ground between his home and the fields, he looked toward the sea and was horrified to see a fire burning on the shore, the unmistakable sign that the natives had arrived again. He hurried back to his castle, climbed over the fence, and pulled the ladder up after him. Quickly, he loaded his muskets and pistols, preparing to defend himself. He feared that if the natives saw his crops, they would know someone was living on the island and would stop at nothing to find him. After waiting for a while with no sign of danger, Robinson became too anxious to stay still. He grabbed his telescope and climbed up to the top of the rock where he had a clear view of the shore. There, he saw 9 natives gathered around the fire, cooking something. He couldn't tell exactly what they were cooking, but he had a good idea. The natives danced around the fire, all of them naked, for nearly 2 hours. They had 2 canoes pulled up on the shore, and Robinson guessed they were waiting for the tide to rise. When it did, they launched their canoes and paddled away. Once he was sure the coast was clear, Robinson rushed to the hill from where he had first spotted the natives. Using his telescope, he saw 3 more canoes drifting away from the island. When he went to the shore, he was horrified to find the remains of the previous attack, with blood still staining the sand. This gruesome sight filled him with determination. He swore to attack the natives next time they appeared, no matter how many there were. For months afterward, he lived in constant unease, never sure when the next attack would come. His nightmares were frequent, and he often woke up in a panic, thinking the natives were coming for him. In mid-May, a violent storm struck, bringing heavy rain, thunder, and lightning. During the night, the wind howled like a hurricane. Robinson couldn't sleep, so he spent the time reading the Bible he had found among the ship's wreckage. Suddenly, he heard a loud thud, like something heavy falling on the floor above him. A minute later, there was another thud. Robinson quickly recognized the sound of gunshots, probably from a ship in distress, signaling for help. He rushed outside, climbed to the top of the rock, and saw the flash of another gun, coming from the direction of the reef. He knew he had to help. He gathered all the dry wood he could find, piled it up, and set it alight as a signal to the ship. Sure enough, as the fire blazed, Robinson saw another gun fired. He kept the fire burning all night. By morning, after the storm cleared, he thought he could see the shape of a ship in the distance, anchored and unmoving. But the weather was still too unclear for him to be sure. Later that day, after the weather had improved, Robinson climbed the hill once more and confirmed that the ship was wrecked on the reef. The crew had almost certainly perished. He was filled with deep sadness, realizing how close he had come to meeting other people, only to find that none had survived. All he found of the crew was the body of a boy, washed ashore near the wreck. From the boy's few belongings, including 2 gold coins and a tobacco pipe, Robinson couldn't tell where he was from, but the pipe at least was useful to him.